Now I will discuss in pedagogy of school subject physical science. Within this course, I am going to discuss about the measurement, assessment and evaluation, which are very much important connecting with the teaching learning process of physical science. So first, let's discuss about the concept of measurement, assessment and evaluation. To many, the word assessment conjures up images of testing, marks, and grade. Assessment is much more than this, but then one needs to know the different terms like assessment, measurement, and evaluation, which are used interchangeably but have different connotations. Assessment is involved in everyday lives of learners. Assessment practices have a long history in our country. Discussions and debates were a regular practice to gauge the knowledge of pupils in the ancient universities of Nalanda and Takshashila. Although there are several forms of assessment within our education system. One of the most visible of these are the formal examination, which is conducted typically at the end of key phases in education. Let us understand the terms measurement, assessment, and evaluation in detail. First, we come to the measurement. Measurement has been the practice with teachers since a very long time. They have been testing their students and assigning numbers regarding the progress of their students in studies and adopt corrective measures accordingly. According to the Bradfeld and Modoc, measurement is the process of assigning symbols to the dimensions of phenomenon in order to characterize the status of phenomena as precisely as possible. Measurement is the process by which a characteristics of an object, person, or activity is perceived and understood on specific standards and is described in standard words, symbols, and definite units. Assessment. Assessment. The term assessment is gaining importance in the present day because it is widely accepted that what is taught is assessed using various tools and that the format of assessment influences the format of learning and teaching. The word assess is derived from the Latin verb assidia, meaning to sit with. This implies that it is something we do with and for students and not to students. The importance of assessment cannot be undermined. High quality assessment is at the very heart of quality education and is the key to raising learning standards. Assessment is invaluable to both the teacher and the taught. It enriches learning, enhances pupil motivation, and at the same time enables teacher to reflect on the methods, strategies used and make modification if necessary. To quote Freeman and Lewis, the five main purposes of assessment are to select, to certify, to describe, to aid learning, and to improve teaching, which give a balance to public judgment and personal development. Some of the advantages of assessment practices are following. It provides valuable data on the breadth and depth of the student learning, help us to understand what children know and what they can do, act as lanes for understanding students' learning by identifying their strength and weakness, provide educators, parents, and families with critical information about a child's development and growth in all developmental areas like cognitive, motor development, language, social, emotional, and approaches to learning. Assessment determine the needs of student for providing additional support. It helps teachers to plan specific strategies of instruction for students based on their needs. It contributes in improving learning outcomes and promote learning. It identify the strengths and weaknesses within a program. Facilitate teachers to use information obtained to modify the teaching learning process and improve pedagogical approaches. It facilitates collaboration among parents, teachers, and educators to support their child. As you can see, the purposes of assessment is to gather valid, reliable, and useful information about student learning, which can be used for monitoring student progress and achievement with respect to learning outcomes, and also for taking appropriate measures to facilitate the students to reach the set goal. Next, come to the evaluation. Now, unlike measurement, the concept of evaluation in the educational sector is comparatively new. Often, the terms are used interchangeably, leading to ambiguity. There are some major differences between the two terms. For example, by testing a child in mathematics by administering a single test based on algebra, we may measure his or her mathematical ability in solving problems in algebra and nothing else. But through evaluation, we may get to know about the interest, abilities, etc. of the child in mathematics, as well as skills, competencies, and his or her critical thinking and problem solving abilities. So evaluation gives you the wholesome measurement of wholesome development of the student, and assessment is focusing on to only specific ability. In education, evaluation is the process of using the measurements gathered in assessments, analyze and interpret the data obtained, and use this information to find out if the objectives of the instruction have been achieved, and also use the information so gathered to determine what students know and understand, how far they have progressed, and how their scores and progress stand in comparison with the other students. Now we come on to the different types of assessment. Assessment can be categorized in 4 different types. Number 1, formative and summative assessment. Number 2, formal and informal assessment. Number 3, qualitative and quantitative assessment. And number 4, direct and indirect assessment. First, we come on to the formative assessment. When the cook tastes the soup, that's formative. When the guest tastes, that is summative. Because at the time of making soup, each time the cook tests and try to observe or get the idea that how far the soup is ready for the presentations or for giving to the guest. But when the guest test at the end, when soup is completely prepared and is given to them. So when the guest test, the guest tries to determine how far the soup is good, whether all the ingredients are there in the soup, okay, whether the quality, essence, and the taste, everything are good and effective or not. So guest testing gives the wholesome measurement, or cook's testing is the specific measurement on a specific quality of the soup. So that is the basic difference of this formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment try to assess or judge onto the specific characteristics or specific ability, whereas summative judges the wholesome development of the students in a specific course or the topic. Now, this popular quote of Robert Stake sums up the major difference between the two types of assessment, formative versus summative. Formative assessment is an integral part of the instructional process with active involvement by students. It provides scope for self and peer assessment besides teacher assessment. Active participation increases students' motivation to learn, and the informal setting and unobstructive techniques of assessment make learning an enjoyable experience. This type of assessments are carried out during a course of instruction and not confined to the end of a session or course, by which continuous feedback is provided to both the teachers and the learners. This facilitates modification or adjustment of the transactional procedures and learning activities. Now, types of formative assessments: teacher observation, student record, questioning strategies, self and peer assessment, portfolios, anecdotal records, checklists and rubrics, quizzes and essays, diagnostic tests, etc. are some of the formative assessment carried out in school. So we get the idea of formative assessment and different types of formative assessment that we are taking in school. Now we come to the summative assessment. Summative assessments conducted, of course, that has already been told, conducted at the end of a course of learning, are the most traditional way of evaluating student work. As the term suggests, it measures or sums up how much a student has learned from the course or semester or unit. It is carried out at intervals or spread out and occur after instruction every few weeks, months, semester, or once a year, when achievement has to be summarized. It is usually reported as graded test, marked according to the scale or set of grades. It is a means to measure at a particular point in time student learning relative to certain standards. Therefore, to rely solely on summative assessment is not advisable because of its unscientific nature. The overemphasis may also produce enormous stress and anxiety among the learners. To put it simply, formative assessment focuses on improving learning, whereas summative assessment summarizes learning. Examples of summative assessment: midterm examination, end of unit or chapter test, end of term or end term examination, at the end of a semester. The ideal way is to balance formative and summative assessment so that a clear picture emerges about the student. This is very much necessary. So we have discussed a brief on the formative assessment and summative assessment. Now we come to the second category of assessment, that is formal and informal assessment. Data from formal assessments are used to support the conclusions made from the test by using standardized measures. The data is mathematically computed and summarized. Scores such as percentiles, marks, or standard scores are most commonly given when the type of assessment is administered. But informal assessments, on the other hand, are not data-driven, but rather content and performance-driven. For example, a language teacher, while assessing the pronunciation of a particular student, uses scores such as 10 out of 15 words pronounced correctly, or rubric scores such as not able to pronounce properly to some extent, pronounce all words correctly, are given from this type of assessment. Now we come to the third category of assessment, that is quantitative assessment and qualitative assessment. First, we come to the quantitative assessment. As the term indicates, quantitative assessment helps to collect data that can be analyzed using quantitative methods. There is much reliance on numerical scores or rating. It uses values obtained by using an instrument based on a standardized system. The major limitation is that data is derived from a selected or predetermined set of possible responses. So quantitative assessment approaches work by the numbers, collecting, analyzing, interpreting, and charting results, trends, and norms, and is mainly concerned with the scholastic achievement, focusing on subject-based performance. Next, come to the qualitative assessment. Now, unlike quantitative assessment, qualitative assessment does not rely on scores or numbers, but on descriptions. It is more concerned with the detailed description of situations or performance. Therefore, it can be much more subjective, but can also be much more valuable in the hands of an experienced teacher. Qualitative is chiefly about evaluating the non-scholastic and mostly all important aspects of the student's personality, including social, emotional, attitudinal, and moral, ethical. Apart from this type, there are some other methods like direct, indirect methods of assessment. In direct method of assessment, students are asked to demonstrate their learning, while in indirect method, students are made to reflect on their learning. Tests, essays, presentation, etc. are generally direct method of assessment, and indirect methods including surveys, interviews, etc. Now come on to the another category of assessment, which are very much common and all of you are familiar with it. This is very much regularly used in the schools and universities also. There is continuous and comprehensive evaluation. In short, CCE. Continuous and comprehensive evaluation, CCE, was introduced to redesign how assessments are formulated in our country. Under the RT Act, CCE is envisaged as a program of continuous evaluation of the student throughout the academic year. The assessment includes both scholastic and co-scholastic aspect, thereby allowing for a comprehensive assessment. The Ministry of Education, in its advisory on implementation of Section 29 of the RT Act, specifies that CC should be built around 5 tools: child's engagement pattern, general observations, observation during group work and individual work in class, child's written work, and anecdotal record. Now come to the another assessment, that is the diagnostic assessment. Diagnostic assessment is generally used to diagnose the weakness or difficulties faced by a student. Tools are administered prior to instruction, which will give a snapshot of what a student knows and modify or plan strategies accordingly. Students are given identical pre-test and post-tests before and after the course. This method allows teachers and students to chart their learning progress by comparing pre-test and post-test result. So by now, you must have understood that the type of assessment activity and the way evidence of learning will be gathered are determined on the basis of various variables, like learning outcomes being assessed, the curriculum which is adopted, the teaching learning activities being conducted, the learning level of student who are assessed, the social context, the learning needs of the student, the class, the age group they belong to, etc. Hence, one size may not fit to all. Instead, a variety of activities may be considered. Also, it is recommended that both formal and informal strategy are used for assessment of knowledge and skill for the pre-primary to college or university level. So this is the overall discussions about the assessment, measurement, evaluation, definition, their types, their use, and exactly how these processes can help to judge the scholastic and co-scholastic development of the students in the science educational era.